Hi, this is Editor's Take. I am Sakshi Batra, and with me is Gaurav Choudhary. He's the Deputy Executive Editor of Moneycontrol, and we are going to be discussing about the US-China trade tensions that are again looming large. Thanks a lot, Gaurav, for joining in. Now, as and when it looks like that US and China are just close to a deal, the tweet by Donald Trump, President of the US, has actually irked and jittered all the global markets across the world. Now, we saw dips across China, in Asia, in Europe, and in India as well. So what has really irked the US now?
So what is happening now is that, this was completely unexpected so far as markets are concerned, and also people who have been tracking, there was a heightened expectation that actually the US and China are moving towards a truce on the trade front. But this has turned it on its head, and he said, and he tweeted, and it is indicated that tariffs worth $200 billion probably could come in for imports from China, probably could come in as early as Friday,
right?
Which is something that was completely unexpected. Whether that happens or not, it's only we have to wait until Friday to find that out. But what is interesting is that whether this is just a negotiating tool used by the US president to force China into some kind of a weakness so far as negotiations are concerned, trade negotiations are concerned, and get a better deal, or is it a threat that he's actually going to implement? That is something that remains to be seen. But even if it's a negotiating tool, if he's trying to use it as an instrument to force China into some kind of, as a bargaining chip, that is something, this is turning out to be a very blunt instrument that was probably avoidable. What is rather unfortunate in all of this is that while the two largest economies are fighting out in the open, and we have been seeing this since March last year when the US actually first imposed tariffs on steel, particularly from China and few other countries, this has been going on. And this has been going on despite the fact that we have a so-called global trade police, which is the World Trade Organization. And World Trade Organization was supposed to act as some mediator. Kind of not as a mediator, but not only as a mediator, but also as a policing body, which is going to impose rules-based global trade regime.
Sure.
That seems to, and in all of this over the last 1 year, we have been seeing that WTO has actually remained a very mute bystander in all of this, as a trade war has been played out by the two largest economies, and left rest of the world completely watching in dismay.
Absolutely. So what will be the fallout of these kind of tweets, that series of tweets which we saw from Sunday onwards from US President on the trade talks that are scheduled to be held tomorrow then?
So as I said, my own understanding is that this probably is being used by the US president, as also the administration, as some kind of a bargaining chip. So he's holding this threat out and trying to send across a message to China that if a certain if certain benefits or certain decisions that the US wants are not part of the deal, then this threat probably will be implemented by the US. And that is something that the US is going to use to maneuver the trade deal in its advantage. I don't think it's going to be implemented as early as Friday, but clearly this tweet is going to loom large over the trade negotiators as they try to hammer out a deal between US and China tomorrow.
Absolutely. But what kind of an escalation of this kind of a trade war would have an impact? What would it be on businesses and the global economy of the world?
So, clearly it could have, in the worst case, it could have very debilitating consequences for world global trade, and also between also for the two principal parties involved in this trade war, which is the US and China. For the US, it is important to understand that an open economy will always make its companies more cost competitive, because it's a very highly innovating country. And the rules of trade, and this is not just textbook theory. This is also common sense that countries who have a comparative and a competitive advantage in producing a certain good X should be producing that good. Likewise, any other country which has a comparative advantage in producing any other good should be producing Y, and they should trade each other. Instead of installing this kind of import clamps, which doesn't work in anybody's favor, particularly the manufacturers and the companies that, say, for instance, will be working in the US, which is US is trying to impose import tariffs. It actually, in the medium term, is going to work against the interest of its own domestic companies.
Absolutely. And how does India get impacted then?
India clearly is also in the middle of a negotiation with the US.
Sure.
Wilbur Ross, the US Commerce Secretary, currently is in India, and he has had a series of meetings with Indian officials, including Commerce Minister Suresh Prabhu. US has clearly made its discomfort known, and is known to Indian officials that it wants easier access to the medical device market in India with no price caps. It wants easier access of Harley-Davidson bikes to India with lower tariffs, and it also wants easier access of its dairy and other products.
Sure.
And clearly it has not hidden its disappointment about the e-commerce policy that India has recently unveiled in the month of February. That has kicked in from the month of February, and also the RBI's diktat that data needs to be stored locally, and this clearly impacts many US banks as well as companies like MasterCard and Visa.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, then, Gaurav, for sharing all that insight. Well, any kind of a full-blown trade war would definitely not be good news for the entire world, and that is what all the economists of the world have been saying. And recently, we've also heard billionaire investor Warren Buffett also talk about it and reiterate the same thing as well. But we so far do not know if President of the US, Donald Trump, really means what he says in its tweets, or is this being used as a negotiating tactic. All eyes will be on tomorrow, when the trade talks are scheduled between the two countries. Thanks a lot for joining us in this edition of Editor's Take, and do stay logged on to moneycontrol.com for more news and updates. Thanks for watching.